Wait, you have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV. Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to TV Guidance Counselor. I don't know why I said that with a vaguely Eastern European accent. Hello, everybody. It's Ken Reed here, your TV Guidance Counselor with the show TV Guidance Counselor, wrapping up 2021 as we are into December in the holiday season. I want to welcome you guys to the show if this is your first time checking out the show because you are a fan of my guest today, the fantastic Anna Campbell-Jones, who is an interior designer, TV presenter from Scotland Home of the Year, which is Scotland's Home of the Year is a show that has been a godsend to me in lockdown. I obviously don't have access to it via Scottish BBC, but it is up on YouTube, which is a bootleg. That's wrong. But for those of us outside of Scotland, it is a way for us to see it. I think they're on 4 seasons or series. They have upcoming a Christmas special, which we discuss here. But Anna's just amazing. Like one of the coolest people I've ever talked to. Former actress. Very briefly, we get into that. Amazingly talented interior designer. She runs Habitus Interior Designs in Glasgow, which I pronounce wrong every single time. And is the presenter with 2 other people of Scotland's Home of the Year, as I mentioned. Had an amazing time talking to her. And I think you'll have an amazing time listening to me talk to her. I apologize. I'm all mixed up today. It's that shift into the winter. But anyway, this is a great episode and you will enjoy it. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Anna Campbell-Jones.
TV is my friend and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Live via satellite from, I want to say sunny Scotland, but that may not be accurate. Anna Campbell-Jones, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine, thanks. And it's not actually raining.
Oh, that's like sun.
So, that's always there's always a plus in Scotland.
Yeah, I've lived in England for a while, but I never made it up to Scotland, and I always wanted to. So at some point, I may make it up there if the world doesn't end and opens back up at some point.
You can move to Scotland and go and hide in a cabin on a remote island, and then you're fine.
Well, if I'm going to go that far, I might as well commit a fun crime first.
Yes. Well, okay. Is that what we're here to talk about?
Yes, we're going to plan a heist. So interestingly, as people could probably hear, you are not Scottish.
No. Although there are people in Scotland that talk like this, but they tend to be in Edinburgh, and I'm in Glasgow. But no, I'm originally from London.
Yes, and that factors in here because when I asked you about doing the show, you mentioned, and I was unaware of this before because I know you from your design work and from the Scottish Home of the Year show, which we'll talk about later, which I discovered on YouTube in lockdown and have loved. But you were actually an actress when you were a kid.
Yes. Yeah, I was I was a self-starter. My mum used to say that I would just bring myself up. And yeah, I managed to get myself the lead in a David Putnam film that had been commissioned for Channel 4 in its sort of very, very early days. Yeah, so I caused a bit of a stir with the family because the content is a little... I don't think you would get a 13-year-old to be in a film like that these days.
Yeah, I had not been able to track down the film itself, but there are a couple trailers for it and commercials, and the description of it does not quite jive with what I saw in the trailers because they make it look very Lolita.
Yeah, well, I mean, if the trailer makes it look Lolita, goodness knows what would happen if you watch the film. It's interesting because... I'm not completely heartbroken that it's buried, but I think it has been probably buried. But basically, it's set in the 60s, and it's set in a boarding school, and it's about a girl called Louise who is rummaging through her recently deceased father's stuff and finds a lot of Masonic gear. He apparently had been going to Masonic meetings every week, but actually, as it turns out, Masonic meetings only happen once a month. So he was having an affair, and Louise finds condoms in the box, and her mother finds them and then thinks that she's up to no good. And of course, Louise is perfectly innocent, apart from the fact that she's started a Masonic cult at her boarding school.
So it's sort of a farce / Skull and Bones type thing. Yes, and a kind of coming of age. I mean, it's quite sweet, actually. It's a sweet film. I'm still kind of proud of it, but I do understand why you've not been able to get a copy of it. Because for Channel 4, which I think started in 83, I think, maybe 82.
Yeah, or 80, yeah.
Really didn't sort of come into its own until like 84, and we started getting like the young ones, and Channel 4 sort of carved out their niche for a lot of comedy, but also when it first started, it was kind of like the Bad Boy Network. Like they were kind of pushing a lot of boundaries to sort of like lay claim for an image to make themselves different from ITV and BBC One and Two.
Absolutely. There was a chat show called The Word. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Mark Lamar hosted The Word.
Yeah. And people would get sort of interviewed whilst lying in a bathtub full of baked beans and things like that. Incredibly radical at the time. Now, you probably channel chop and find that any day of the week.
Yeah, it's if you look, it sort of has the imagery and sort of vision of what MTV sort of was like here at the time, because for my Great Britain listeners, England and the UK had 3 channels forever. This was big news, was a 4th channel. And as far as the guides go, the thing that I always find hilarious is 4 channels, but it took 2 magazines to cover them all, because one just did the BBC stuff and one did ITV and Channel 4.
That's right, yeah. And before Channel 4, that one, the TV Times, only did what was on ITV. But you had all the weird regional variations as well. So you would have, programs about people sheep herding in Yorkshire and stuff like that.
Did you travel a lot around the country when you were growing up, or did you mostly stay in London?
In terms of Britain, I stayed in London mostly, but we used to go to Scotland a lot. We had a holiday home in Argyll, and so we used to go up there a lot. So it was a kind of weird mixture between living quite centrally in London and having a very urban childhood. And London in the 70s was, it's not as clean and shiny and filled with millionaires as it is now. And so we would go from that to being in this incredibly remote part of Scotland where you wouldn't see another human being for weeks.
Because it's funny, I always tell people too, like even now, like London is so unlike the vast majority of the rest of Great Britain. Like most of it's fairly countryside and pretty rural feeling, and London is a whole thing unto itself.
It is. I mean, it's quite interesting. Talking to my friends in London, there's quite a few of them that would quite like London to be independent from the UK. So when we're having the conversation about Scotland's independence, they kind of get it, because they are very, very different to the rest of, certainly to the rest of England. And there's other great cities, of course, in Britain, Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, all really, Newcastle is absolutely fantastic. But yeah, London gets all the glory. And it's become a little bit like, in the same way that New York has, like a theme park version of itself. There's nothing grungy really in the main part of London anymore.
Yeah, even from when I lived there, which was the early 2000s, I went back 2 years ago and it was so different. I was walking around Soho and like nothing I remembered was there. It was all shiny and new. And yeah, it is. It's like London the Ride. And to your point, the 70s in England, as like a huge fan of punk rock and all those sorts of things, I don't think people in the United States quite get how kind of dire things were in London, especially in the 70s, where you had like garbage strikes, people out of work, and 4-day weeks, and like all kinds of upheaval that we just never saw here.
No, that's right. And then we had our own homegrown terrorism as well, because I was brought up in Hammersmith, which is obviously very exciting because we had the Hammersmith Ballet.
Odeon, yeah.
And the Odeon. So 2 great venues, plus Club Foot that I used to go to, which is a psychobilly place in the middle of Hammersmith Broadway. And but Hammersmith Bridge was a favourite target of the IRA in the 70s. So regularly my brother couldn't get to school because it was on the other side of the river.
Oh, wow.
But that was just, oh, right, a day off school today because there's a bomb on the bridge. Oh, well,
right. Kids just adapt.
What's on TV? Not much.
So you're a psychobilly fan, like the Meteors and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. The Cramps, Iguana Bats, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Cramps are all one of my all-time favorite bands. I actually, this is totally off topic, but this is William Shatner covering Garbage Man.
That I need to hear.
It's pretty amazing. It's fantastic. So we went with the issue here from December 31st, 1983 into January 6th, 1984. Reason being, this was the second of 2 airings of the movie you were in. And it's pretty complimentary of the movie, actually. It says it was the most popular of the series. I think there were 6 films that Channel 4 commissioned in that series. And it's very complimentary of you and your acting skills.
I know. I was reading back and looking, because I dug out all the kind of the folder of all the clippings and stuff after you and I spoke, and it took me down memory lane because I kind of forgotten all about it. I was very much, I had thought that I wanted to be an actor, and that was my absolute ambition. And then my first go at it, my first audition, I got the lead in a film.
Totally normal.
Yeah. And then I went on a chat show to promote the film, and obviously because of the time that it takes to edit and how teenagers change. So I was 14 when I did the chat show, and I look completely different. I've got a giant quiff. I've got skinny dog-tooth trousers. I've got pointed shoes from Liberated Lady on the King's Road and a cap-sleeve T-shirt. And I'm lolling on the sofa with working my best kind of, Johnny Rotten attitude.
Like you're on Bill Grundy.
Yeah. And the interviewer, who's all like nice hair and twin set, is asking me, oh, there's the dogs. Mm-hmm. Hey, dogs. Yeah. Asking me about what's your next project and so on. And I'm lolling there and going, yeah, I'm not going to be an actor. I'm going to go to art school.
Which is in many ways one of the most actory responses possible.
Yes. That was the beginning and the end of my career as a thespian.
It is funny that you're like, I was an actor, tried it, wasn't into it. Had a lead in a movie, moved on.
Yeah. And then forward wind, to my 50s, and I'm like, I want to be a TV presenter. Yeah, all right.
I'll give that a shot. But were your parents in the arts at all, or was this just totally left field kind of thing?
My dad was an architect, and my mum was a stay-at-home mum. So, but she was very creative, my mum. She was always, she let me do whatever I wanted. I was always dressing up in mad things and making mad creative projects out of bits of old cardboard and stuff. So she let me express myself, and she let me be in this film, although she did negotiate to remove a proposed nude scene.
For a 13-year-old?
Yeah. So that was about as controlling as she got, really. She was good.
And that's more like looking out for you than controlling.
Yeah, exactly. I think controlling is probably the wrong adjective, yeah.
Do you have siblings?
I've got a younger brother, yes, William.
So were you guys kind of watching the same stuff or into the same things, or was it a pretty separate field of interests?
No, I mean, he's 4 years younger than me, and we were arch enemies throughout most of our childhood, I would say. And with one TV in the house and 3 channels for most of our childhood, there was a lot of strife about what to watch.
Was he a sports guy? Was that the big difference?
Yeah. He was a grade A student, brilliant at maths, a championship rower. He rowed at Henley. He was generally an all-round dream child. And then there was me.
It was similar with my sister and myself. She was 3 years younger than me, and it was very, very different. There was very few things we agreed upon as far as watching or listening to in that time. But as the oldest, we often did get to control regardless.
Absolutely, yes. Bossy big sister trope. That's me.
We get veto power. And you went to art school in Scotland, right?
That's right. Yeah, I did a foundation course in London, and then in 1988, which it feels like a lifetime ago, but you know how it is, doesn't feel like that long ago in my soul. I decided to go to Glasgow School of Art, just a kind of a very enlightened tutor on my foundation course. said that I should try it. And so it was exciting. So, thought London was gritty, and Glasgow in the 80s was really something else. It was brilliant fun.
Yeah, I've never been. All four of my father's grandparents come from Glasgow.
Oh, really?
So I never met them, but my father's always like, when I was growing up, I never understood a word my grandparents said. Like, sounds about right.
Yes, it was like that for me when I first appeared, although the feeling was mutual. People didn't really know what I was on about either.
Yeah, I went to Goldsmiths for my final year of school, so I also had a bit of an art school experience, although I didn't go for art, which doesn't make a lot of sense if you're going to Goldsmiths. So when we dive in here, so it's New Year's Eve is the first night this week, and I gave you initially sort of a Frankenstein that I made of the radio and TV times, so you had sort of access to everything that was airing. Did you guys get these guides? Did you buy them, or would you look in the newspaper?
Well, my father used to read the Times every morning over breakfast, so we used that to see what was on television. But did occasionally get the TV Times and Radio Times. There was, especially at Christmas, because we always get a bumper issue with lots of extra information about what was going to be on. Because at Christmas, that was a good time for TV.
Because they're like, people are home.
Yeah,
pretty much everyone's home for 2 weeks. And that's another thing, even in the early 2000s when I lived in the UK, nothing was open on Sundays. If there was a holiday, everything was closed. The presumption was people were at home with their families doing stuff, which was never the case here.
Yeah.
There are still times my wife is from Stafford, and there are still times that she'll, talk to her parents and be like, oh, we were at the store last night. And they're like, last night? It's like, yeah, what time are the stores open to? I don't know, 11? It's like don't they close at 5? But they don't. So this is really much more so than here, seems to be programming with the idea in mind that whole families are sort of sequestered in the home for the 2 weeks of the holidays.
Yeah, and they all have to watch the same thing. So the programs had something for everyone, I suppose, in the family. Yeah. It's
interesting, too, that the times are not the same here. So, stuff starts at, 10:20 or, 8:10. We're always, hour and half hour. It was, very uniform.
Yeah, I don't know why that was. I think that's probably it's a old-fashioned thing, really, isn't it? I suppose it would make a TV program and see how long it ended up.
Yeah. Let's see how long this story takes to tell, and then not cut it or pad it in any way.
Exactly.
Which sounds so crazy. Even now, where the US has sort of adopted more of a UK model with streaming, it's 6 episodes or 13 episodes. It's as long as it needs to be. I am noticing that that's sort of become the cliche. So there are things that clearly were written as a 2-hour movie that they've made into 13 episodes of a show. And 5 of the episodes are just wheel spinning and nothing is happening.
Oh, don't. Yeah.
But that's just my complaint. So what would this would have been, 14-year-old you watching on New Year's Eve?
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny. I was looking at the schedule and I was thinking it was pretty slim pickings, actually. I think maybe they must have assumed that everybody would be out on the randan, as they say, on New Year's Eve. But I picked a couple of things for sort of nostalgia's sake and something because I was curious as to what it was. I chose stock car racing because my dad and his brother used to be racing drivers.
Wow.
But sort of, in the 50s, when to be a racing driver, you just had to sort of turn up with a car.
And be a little bit crazy.
Be a bit crazy. And so there was always a big interest in all things motor racing in our family. And my dad he remained a boy racer right up until he was not allowed to drive anymore. A couple of arguments with other vehicles. And we used to go and watch stock car racing. I can't even remember where it was, but it was somewhere just outside London. And I just remember that was something that we used to do as a family that was really, really good fun. Just the noise and the dust and the, being allowed to eat unhealthy snacks and so on. And I don't ever remember it being on TV, But then when I saw it in that schedule, I thought, oh, yeah, okay, I would watch that just sort of for old time's sake, you know.
Yeah, and I wonder if this was the kind of thing where they would put the weirder stuff on sometimes during the holidays or like sort of off times because they didn't necessarily have... the UK definitely didn't do reruns as much as we did here. It would be sort of encore airings. It would be like kind of a big deal if they reran something. So instead they'd show like, what do we have? I don't know, car racing.
Yeah, just some random, just cars going round and round and round. Probably just one camera as well.
Oh yeah, very easy to shoot.
Yeah.
Which is funny, like when I've started doing the show and really looking back at sort of, especially the early days of television, the easiest things for them to air were like wrestling, bowling, things where they literally had like one or two people and a fixed camera and it was like super easy to do. So I imagine, yeah, why not? We can put one camera. The cars are going to come by.
Yeah, they're going to keep coming. If and get a crash, then, you know, that's a bit of excitement. But yeah, I mean, the thing about growing up with 3 channels is that you do start to watch things that, you know, really you wouldn't choose to nowadays with, you know, hundreds and hundreds of channels. And something that my brother and I did share a passion for was snooker. And snooker in the sort of late 70s, early 80s in the UK, there's an amazing series called Gods of Snooker that's just been on recently. Hurricane Higgins and all these fantastic characters, really, really colourful. So we used to watch that a lot. And then we had a little snooker table that we used to play on as well.
And that's still on. Like I remember Sundays, it was like snooker was the only thing on, it seemed like.
Yeah.
For hours and hours.
Yeah, so you had no choice. You know, there wasn't anything that you would normally be interested in. So you just chose to become super, super invested in something really weird. Like...
Which is pretty great character building. Like when you're sort of exposed to stuff involuntarily, you get a much more well-rounded sort of set of interests, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm still quite partial to it, I have to say.
Do you play it all now?
If I get the opportunity, yeah, a bit of snooker or a bit of pool. I mean, I'm absolutely shockingly bad at it, but I can feel the competitive urge rising when I see one in a pub.
I'm like a reverse pool hustler in that I'll come in like really confident and they'll think I'm like really good. And then I'm just awful. Like I cannot, same with bowling, like any sort of individual, like barroom type sport, darts, awful, but they'll be like, oh man, this guy knows what he's doing. And then it'll be like, oh wow, he's the worst I've ever seen. Don't know how to monetize that, but someday I'll figure it out.
Okay. Yeah, well, there's a project.
So 2 sports thus far
Yes.
on New Year's Eve. And then, so you're kind of not old enough to go out, I imagine, at this era. Were your parents going out, leaving you guys at home on New Year's? Was it that kind of thing?
Well, sometimes they used to take us with them to parties, like when we were younger. And but yeah, I mean, quite a big family. My dad was one of 5, so there was usually something going on, like a big kind of family get together. Actually, so at somebody's house, yes, a lot of drinking, and then a lot of drink driving afterwards.
Oh yes, well, it was the 70s.
Absolutely, yes.
That's how we did things here as well. Anything else on New Year's Eve you had there?
Well, I had Bergerac, which is a very, very long-running series about a detective on the island of Jersey, which is one of the Channel Islands. Now, I don't know if your listeners will really even know what the Channel Islands are, but there's Guernsey, Jersey, and Sark, and they're just off the coast of Brittany. But it's like a little piece of old-fashioned, always sunny, misty-eyed England, with an incredibly high crime rate. If you watch Bergerac, somebody getting murdered every week.
There's only 5,000 people here, and there's a murder every week.
But I've always liked, you know, a bit of crime procedural, and that one was just like lovely scenery and nice, predictable. I suppose it's the sort of equivalent of not nearly as good as Columbo, but I used to love watching Columbo too. But it's that same thing where you just know what you're going to get, and it's very, very comfort TV.
Yeah, it's funny how really until the 90s when the procedurals, the thing I always talk about that was the difference is we started getting more into actually showing autopsies, and then the murder procedurals became less quaint. Because that was this, for years it was always, like Murder, She Wrote here, and it was like very Agatha Christie, and like, yes, someone's murdered, but it's like cute. Yes. Like it's the kind of thing where someone's like, "Oh, I'm dead," and they just look asleep or something.
Yeah, and the camera pans to like a butterfly resting on a little flower or something. Like that.
It's like it's like a family murder, and there is sort of that tradition of the shows where it's also the detective is sort of fish out of water wherever the murder is as well. Like they're very rarely like from that place. It's like it's outsider, and then also like locals don't want to talk to him. Things are different here,
That's right. Well, he used to zoom around in a Jag, and he had a sort of leather blouson jacket, and he was definitely kind of that middle-aged cool.
Yes. He's hip. He's cool. He's 45. But Jersey, which people probably know from the Jersey cows, which are the cutest cows.
Absolutely.
But that's sort of also, I forget where the Wicker Man takes place, but I always think of those islands as like very Wicker Man-y.
Yes, I think they wish they were. I don't think anything very exciting happens there apart from tax havens. Maybe
Jimmy Carr is there counting his Scrooge McDuck money. And then so then we move on to New Year's Day, which is always to me kind of a disappointing day.
Well, yeah, everyone feels filled with remorse and disappointment on New Year's Day, don't they? Even when you're a teenager, you might have managed to sneak some of the sweet sherry or something like that and be suffering from remorse. So I picked things that like that kind of soothing Sunday type TV. So I had Aladdin and the 40 Thieves, and I loved reading that book when I was a kid. And something that I find quite sad actually about the sort of proliferation of channels. You can always watch something that you want to watch, and with so few channels, you just watched what was on. And I just really, really, in my childhood, remember watching all these old movies and really, really enjoying them. And that's something I think that people miss out on now. If I make reference to Yul Brenner in a group of people slightly younger than me, they don't know what I'm talking about. I was obsessed with him growing up. I watched every single one of his films whenever it came on. But yeah, so that sort of, so I had Aladdin, the 40 Thieves, and South Pacific. Those old American musicals. I just absolutely love them. And it's funny, it's a point of contention between me and my partner, because when we were first dating, we went to see, what's that film? Oh, the Ryan Gosling.
Oh, Hollywoodland? Not Hollywood. La La Land?
La La Land, that's the one, yeah. And because he was new boyfriend and all that, he was like, I'll go and see La La Land with you.
I love La La Land.
And I looked at him, and his jaw was like tense, and his arms were folded. And I was like, at the end, how did you enjoy that? And he's like, it was fine. So he had to admit that he's one of a large group of mainly men who absolutely cannot stand musicals. So for me, watching musicals is a kind of a secret pursuit, something that I will do. I'll just watch them on my own and revel in the glorious Technicolor and the preposterous plots and the beautiful clothes. And yes, the South Pacific is a really, really fine example.
You can even entice him in with the musical gateway drug of Elvis films.
Yes, we see. I think he probably could cope with Elvis films because he's a bit of a rock and roll and a bit of a country music fan. But the irony is that he has a grown up job, but he's a brilliant songwriter and musician. And years ago, he wrote a song for Celtic Football Club.
Oh wow! Called
4-Leaf Clover, which became a huge hit and is played before the match in the grounds nearly every week. And then he got this weird royalty payment, and it was because his song 4-Leaf Clover had been used in Celtic, the musical. a wonderful, wonderful bit of Schadenfreude there, which I very much enjoyed. I still tease him about it on a regular basis.
Yeah, that is amazing. And also to your point, I always say that like those of us that grew up sort of pre-millennium, we got this amazing education of like the first 50 or 60 years of film and television just because it was cheap to air, basically.
Yeah.
Which is kind of great. And South Pacific has sort of a weird, I feel like the generation of people who grew up in the 70s in England have more of I don't know if it just aired all the time there, but there definitely seems like it's much more well known than here. To the point where you get Captain Sensible doing Happy Talk or whatever. So it's for whatever reason, that movie has a bigger audience in the UK among certain group than it does here. And I don't know why.
Maybe it's because it's so peculiar and eccentric. And the Captain Sensible, I was going to mention that. I mean, what a brilliant version of that song.
Oh yeah, he's still the only guest I've ever had that walked out on me. After 10 minutes.
Wow, what did you do?
Nothing. He's just like the Damned are probably my favorite band, but he's like a 60-year-old 13-year-old, and his attention span is very small. And he agreed he wanted to do the show because he was like, I hate TV. And I'm like, well, that's an interesting angle. We could talk about why you hate TV. And he was like, I don't watch it. And then during the show, we had interview after the show, he was on stage and he was referencing a bunch of movies. He was referencing The Prisoner and he was referencing Phantom of the Paradise and all this stuff. And so I was like, you don't watch TV, but you reference these things on stage. Did you watch a lot of that sort of sci-fi and weird sort of British? You get a ton of these sci-fi things in the 60s and 70s. And he goes, I'm terminating the interview. And he goes, you want to talk to Vanian? And before that, they were like, Dave doesn't do interviews. Like, Vanian's really aloof and whatever. And so I was like, well, I have 10 minutes. I can't use this. This is terrible. And I saw Vanian walked off stage. And when they play, he had like a three-piece full sort of teddy boy, a monocle. He gets off stage, goes into the dressing room, and comes out in like a different hanging around suit. Like a three-piece suit. And he was just sitting there, and I was like, oh, can I talk to you about old TV? He's like, yeah. And I interviewed him for like an hour, and it was like one of the longest interviews he ever did. It ended up being way better, but so I thank Captain Sensible for not taking the whole time to talk about horror movies with Dave Vanian was pretty great. There's also a weird thing on here that struck me, and I don't think this aired in the US, although it had to have, because it's hosted by Jacqueline Smith. So it looks like it was produced for US TV, but it's called Magic with the Stars, and it's Orson Welles, Jacqueline Smith, and David Copperfield, and Lonnie Anderson.
Oh my goodness. That sounds absolutely bonkers.
Crazy. Well, Orson Welles was a huge magician, a magic enthusiast, and did magic tricks forever. But, right. we're talking 1983 Orson Welles doing magic is weird. And Buster Keaton is in it.
That, I didn't spot that. That does sound like something worth watching.
Yeah.
I wonder have you tried to find it?
I haven't, but I would be shocked if that wasn't online. Like a lot of those, doing stand-up forever, I learned that the only people more obsessive and nerdy about the thing they do are magic nerds. And they collect every single special. So I'd be surprised if that wasn't available.
Yeah, that does sound absolutely extraordinary, that one.
And then New Year's Day is when they re-aired your movie.
Nice, yes.
Did you watch it when it aired? Like, did you watch it with your family? Was that the first time you saw it?
Yes, that's right. Yes. Gosh, I can hardly remember what it was like watching it with my family, because I think I was so, well, if you've ever watched yourself on TV, it's kind of mortifying, and you're very, very focused on what your performance is like, and whether, and also I was worrying about whether I was going to be looking uncool, because I had done that before. I thought that I had done that before I was cool.
Right.
And I thought but yeah, and I can remember there was quite a furore in the family, because I didn't know that my grandfather had been a Mason.
Oh. So
yeah, there's a lot of handbag clutching about me bringing the family into disrespect. I can't even say that. Disrepute.
Disrepute.
There is definitely just tea in this mug. I've not started on the gin yet.
I mean, you are 5 hours ahead. I wouldn't blame you.
sun's below the yardarm somewhere, right?
It's funny that, as we discussed earlier, given that movie, like, that's the aspect that bothered them.
Yes, absolutely. Me running around, in a bikini with a Masonic apron on. They didn't like the bit where I had to blow up a condom. That caused a bit of anxiety. But it was good. It was funny. I can remember going to Harrods with my mum the weekend after it had been on, and we were in the lift, and people were all sort of whispering and staring at me, and it was a very, very peculiar feeling.
Because it is to the point there's so fewer channels. If you were on TV, even kind of now in the UK, there's a really good chance people will recognize you, even if they didn't necessarily see the thing you were in. Like, they would have seen ads or trailers or like, they would recognize you.
Absolutely, yes. It's just a shame I didn't capitalize on it more, I suppose.
You weren't asked to do, like, turn the lights on at Blackpool. Like, Sainsbury's openings.
I think at that point my mum did decide to act as a firewall, and so that she felt that I should be concentrating on my schoolwork, get my exams and, knuckle down.
How long did the people recognizing you last? Was that a pretty short shelf life, or did it kind of... Okay.
Yeah, like 2 weeks. Because obviously, very few people had video recorders as well. And, as you're saying, things weren't repeated, you didn't have catch up. So if you missed it, you missed it. When did you start getting recognized recently for doing the Scottish Home of the Year? I imagine you get recognized from that. Yeah, that's nuts, because Scotland's Home of the Year is, I gather, the most watched programme on the BBC Scotland channel. So, yeah, I mean, I can't leave the house without people saying hi to me. But it's lovely because it's you've watched the show. Yeah. And, it is on YouTube. I know it's not meant to be on YouTube, but, that's how it goes.
We can't get it here otherwise.
But I get contacted by people from all, when you contacted me, in the States, I get contacted by people in the Philippines, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, like everywhere. People are kind of obsessed with it. And I think, obviously, the intention of the programme was that it was made for a Scottish audience. But I think they should broadcast it nationally or make it available officially elsewhere in the world, because so many people have got a fantasy about having a beautiful dream escape home. I mean, we were joking about, you committing a crime and going to live in a hut on, Barra or something like that. But, I think a lot of people have got a fantasy about what it would be like to live in the Highlands or in a remote part of Scotland. And it's a very warm, gentle show where we travel all over Scotland looking at people's lovely homes. Yeah,
it's extremely complimentary, which it's not a makeover show. It's not a let's go in and go, you guys are awful, let's fix everything. It's like let's just go to these places and be like, good job everybody. And they're all very different though. It's kind of like everyone's great, who just did the best one?
Yeah, I mean, when they approached me to do the show, they said, we want you to judge people's homes. And I was really, really uncomfortable with the idea of doing that. It just goes against everything I believe in. I think people, I'm looking at your amazing home office there. Why would I come in and go, well, that doesn't go with that? I mean, that's just not what a home is about. A home it should be an expression of who you are and all the stuff you love. So we talked quite a lot with the producers about sort of shifting the emphasis from a kind of design judgment to a celebration of the idea of home and what home means to everyone, and that homes are as unique as the people that live in them, and that we should be celebrating that. And so we have, in the various series, we've had a castle, we've had a one-bedroom studio flat, we've had ex-council house, it's been sort of had a makeover, new builds, just every single possible kind of home, and different age. They don't all have to be new. They don't have to be newly done. That's the point of it, really. Yeah,
and because, seeing just some of your design aesthetic, which from what I've been able to tell is very sort of mid-century, back to the psychobilly, it sort of does sort of fit into that thing. It's not about like you being like this. There's definitely been homes that you've gone to that I'm like, oh, this seems like a place you would design, or like this is kind of in your aesthetic, but it's still not like I prefer this one because this is what I like. It's like I prefer this one because that they succeeded in what they were going for, and I'd never seen anything like that or something.
That's right. Actually, I have to be really, really careful if I go into a home and I absolutely love it because it's my vibe. Because I've got to be, I'm a judge. I can't bring my personal feelings into it too much. Although they do creep in from time to time. I don't know if you saw the episode where I burst into tears.
Yes. Yes.
It's a place which is so beautiful.
Yeah.
But yeah, that happens sometimes. But
which is some of the very real. Like all three of you seem like you're actually enjoying being there, and it's interesting to you, which I think is what translates. It's not just like I'm the host of this thing, and I don't care if I'm here or not.
Absolutely, and I think it's funny because we're funny. Anybody that hasn't watched it, so there's me, and I'm there's me, ex whatever I used to be, punk-et, rockabilly-et. And then there's Michael, who is a kind of like a slightly Dave Grohl-esque, languid architecture. He's an architecture professor. And he often goes off on these like mad, dreamy tangents. And then Kate, who's absolutely brilliant. She's a blogger. She's some huge presence on Instagram, and she's fantastic lifestyle expert. And but we're quite an odd threesome, but we actually really, really get on. We really, really like each other, and we do get super excited. Like when we're about to go into a house before the cameras start rolling, we're like, "Ooh, I wonder what this one's going to be like." We're really, really into it. And I think that if any of us, if I felt like I wasn't feeling like that anymore, I would have to stop doing it because it has to be sincere. It's a very sincere program, and I think that's why it's so popular. Yeah,
it translates. It reminds me very much of people have seen it, which I don't know if this aired in the UK, but have you seen the show Somebody Feed Phil? It was on Netflix. Mm-hmm. It's Phil Rosenthal, who was the guy who created the show Everybody Loves Raymond here.
Oh, yeah.
And the nicest, most genuine guy in the world, super wealthy from Everybody Loves Raymond. And the show is basically him just traveling around the world, eating food and complimenting people.
Oh.
And it's just, and he's, it's very genuine, and it has the similar vibe. Like those have been the shows I've, in the last sort of 18 months that I know I've gravitated more towards stuff like that because it's sort of comforting and reassuring and just nice.
Well, I don't know about sort of how the sort of general daily TV is developing in the States, but certainly here there seems to be a lot more programming which is of that kind of just kindness, niceness, comfort.
We need it.
There's an amazing program on BBC called The Repair Shop.
Oh, I love The Repair Shop. Yes.
Oh my God. I mean, that is like Valium. It's just the most soothing bit of TV. And obviously Bake Off, massive international sensation. The same thing. Nothing bad. Somebody might drop a cupcake. That's as bad as it's ever going to get. And I think that's what we need. Yeah. The world is going mad all around us. We need to escape.
Yeah, like even The Repair Shop, which I'm always really impressed by the skills that people have. Like for some reason, the people redo the dolls and like the teddy bears. I'm like, oh my, wow. Or like the painting lady. Like these people are amazing. And then it's not a competition. That's the big thing. It's just like, oh, this person had a thing and then they made it nice and now everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
The women that repair the dolls and the cuddly toys are called the bear ladies.
Yes. Who could hate that?
That's as risque as it gets.
I'm sure someone wrote a complaint letter. So Bank Holiday Monday, what struck your fancy there?
Well, I had put Thunderball because I really loved watching the old James Bond movies. And I remember reading Dr. No when I was about that sort of age and really, really just loving it. And I still like reading crime fiction from time to time. But actually, Thunderball is the most problematic.
It certainly is. It's the most, everything people complain about James Bond for, that's like the shining example of all of those things.
Yeah, that's the one you turn to when you want to say, this is why Bond is bad.
Yes.
But I suppose I think part of the reason I've got it in there is because of that, because of the sort of uncensored nature of TV, the kinds of tropes and ideas, biases, bigotry that we used to see on TV growing up that just felt completely normal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I always reference, I think was it the black and white minstrel show?
I was just going to mention that.
That was on till what, like 82 or something crazy like that?
Oh my goodness. We had the cassette of the black and white minstrel show that we used to listen to in the car going on holiday. We used to alternate between that and the Muppets.
Which, from a entertainment perspective, those do kind of go together era-wise. That sort of vaudeville thing. But no!
It's so strange.
It's crazy. Greg Proops is a friend, and Greg was saying that when he had first went over to England to do Who's Line, he was at the BBC, even though I think it was a Channel 4 show, and he's a big music nerd, and so he was like, oh, can I look through the record library, and he walked in and he happened to see a black and white minstrel show, and then he turned it over and it said 1979. He was like, what the fuck is this?
I mean, it's not funny.
No.
But it does, you've got a generation of people. I mean, I'm sure TV was just as un-PC when you were growing up in the States as it was here in the UK. And you talk about, unconscious bias and white privilege and all of that kind of thing. And a whole bunch of people, was middle-aged people in Britain and older, that grew up with that kind of casual racism just as entertainment.
Yeah.
It's like turning around a battleship.
Yeah. It's hard to convey to them when the thing they watched, because to them, it's a comedy. It's fun and everyone enjoyed it. What's the problem? We're not making fun of anyone or whatever, because it's not like... I don't know. It's not like overtly, violently mean towards someone in their view. So they're like, I don't, what's the... And it's so hard to explain why it's wrong to them.
No, it's horrendous. And yeah, so Thunderball lots of James Bond, the early James Bond films had terrible examples of racism in them, as well as misogyny. So we should probably move on from Thunderball.
Yes, that's right. Although there is sort of a tradition in the UK on Bank Holiday Mondays to show James Bond movies. That's
absolutely. Yes.
That's the big tradition. And to the point, going back to Channel 4, comedy in the UK and stand-up, which is sort of my area of nerdiness, in the 70s was that Northern men's club, old vaudeville racist kind of thing. But Channel 4 was really... the mainstream sort of champion of the alternative sort of punk rock comedy scene, and made that stuff the mainstream in the UK, which we didn't have here. With the fact that people like Ben Elton and all the Young Ones people and Joe Brand and all these people became, mainstream comedy figures as a almost direct reaction to those sorts of things is amazing.
Yeah, so maybe we have the Black and White Minstrel show to thank for that then.
Yes.
For that and Channel 4 giving people a shot, letting people do things. Because I think there was a lot of stuff as well that was terrible. But that's the point, isn't it? You have to do a lot of experimenting, and then you kind of find a new way to do comedy. And I think it's so funny that it's still called alternative comedy when actually it's it
is the mainstream.
40 years old now. The concept of alternative comedy.
It's like alternative to, because the stuff it's alternative to wasn't really even comedy, arguably, to begin with.
There's nothing more joyful than introducing my sons when they were in their teens to the young ones.
Did they like it?
Yeah, it's evergreen. They're absolutely just totally obsessed with it. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, that show changed my life in a lot of ways, in that MTV here used to air it in an hour block with the Monkees, which makes total sense.
Yeah.
And I was I was 5 or 6 years old or something, flipping through the channels. I couldn't sleep. And I saw the episode with The Damned. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but this is everything I like. I didn't know it till I saw it just now. But it really was. I was like, this is amazing. And yeah, everyone I've ever showed that show to, they're like, this is so weird and I love it. Yeah,
it was brilliant. You had to make sure you got the parents out of the room and you could watch it, because if you hadn't watched it and memorized all the best lines for the school playground the next day, then you were toast.
Yes.
Social death.
Did you ever watch Girls on Top, the sort of weirdly sequel series?
No.
It's Ruby Wax and Dawn French and Tracy Ullman and Jennifer Saunders, and it came out like 2 years after it, but it's sort of the same show but with them. And
right.
It's, as a Young Ones fan, I do enjoy it because it's like a weird Bizarro universe version. And you can also tell that between series 1 and series 2, that's when Jennifer Saunders started dating Ade Edmondson, because her character basically all of a sudden becomes Vivian. Like she starts talking like, it's very, very weird. But if you run out of Young Ones and you want to watch something else, Girls on Top is worth watching.
I had a bit of a crush on Ade Edmondson, I have to say.
Can't blame you. He was a very dynamic character there. There's also an ad here for a thing that you had in the UK that we did not have here, which is Teletext.
Oh, yes.
Did not exist here. And I try to explain it to people, and it's like it was not cable, it's over the air, and it's sort of like a DOS bulletin board, computer board on your TV where you would get like quizzes and like extra information and stuff.
Oh yeah, the weather.
Yeah.
Live weather updates, so you get headlines. It was like the future of the internet.
Yes, and this is in like early 80s, and it was still going when I lived there, and it really impressed me.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, yes, much underrated. I think we have to write a documentary about it or something.
The history of teletext. Yeah, it was like the internet on your TV, but over the air and 20 years earlier.
Yeah, and you could find out what was on TV using it as well. So I mean, it was extraordinary.
Yeah, I the first time I saw that, I was like, "What is this?" And people were like, "Oh, it's teletext. What's a big deal?"
And you could use it. You could also use it to get subtitles for everything as well.
Yes, which we had, but it was like someone went, "Hey, these closed caption subtitles are a cool thing. Could we do tons of other stuff with this as well?"
Yeah.
It's like, you can.
He's advertising it.
Yes, I know. Everyone, bring back teletext. I'm sure there's some, like the way some people are really into vinyl. I'm sure there's some analog people who are like, I only read things via teletext. I don't use a computer. It's just... There's kind of screensavers that you have of like a roaring log fire or a fish tank or something like that. You just get a DVD of just a randomly scrolling Ceefax and teletext, and you just have that on in the background. I 100%, without even looking, can guarantee you they have those on YouTube. And there are probably people who it's like they're just like calming Zen thing. Yeah. Let's get the teletext on; it'll be fine. Anything on Tuesday that struck out to you?
So going from schoolyards to Grange Hill. So I put that on because that was another weekly thing that was a compulsory watch, daily dramas of a London secondary school, and it was again kind of quite radical actually, even for the BBC, because it ended up covering all sorts of things. A very, very big story was when Zamo got addicted to drugs. And then it was huge, and soap opera for kids basically. But certainly the first thing that I'd ever seen like that was made directly for you, like as a kid, not kids TV and not adult TV that you could kind of keep up with, but was directly aimed at us.
Yeah, and that was something we did not have here. Like you had that in the UK. Canada had Degrassi Junior High around the same time, which was the same kind of thing. It was not a glamorous nighttime soap. It's not 90210. It's like a pretty gritty kids in a school, everyday problems, almost like docudrama in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And was Byker Grove was the other one, right? Which I think was more of a comedy, but was northern.
Yeah, Byker Grove. I think it was one of those things. You were either, it's a bit like, are you a heavy metal or soul music? You
Right.
kind of like one or the other. Byker Grove did not appeal.
Yes.
But I have to say, Byker Grove did give us Ant and Dec.
That's true.
Which your audience won't know how huge they are, but they are the behemoth of light entertainment TV in the UK now.
They pretty much host everything but Scotland's Home of the Year.
Yeah, that's it. They've probably got if they listen to this, they'll probably get their agent on that and then I'll get ousted.
Yeah, can we host that as well?
Yeah.
So yeah, Grange Hill is a pretty fascinating show that is kind of hard to see now, I think, too. But it's for a certain generation, that show was like just mind blowing because they were like, it's about
Absolutely.
us.
Yes, it's about us, and the theme music is just absolutely brilliant. I don't know if you can like put a clip of it in the show.
I'll put a clip of it in here now. There you go.
Oh yeah, it's brilliant.
Was Dexter Fletcher on that show?
No, he was in a thing called Newsroom.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Newsroom.
Yeah.
Which was later.
He was also in Bugsy Malone.
Yes. Shot in England.
That's right.
Because was it Alan Parker? Did Alan Parker do Bugsy?
Alan Parker. Actually, fascinating fact. At the time that I was making Secrets, I was dating Alan Parker's son.
Oh, wow. Wow. Were you
I'm just saying.
Were you like, oh, wow, your dad, like you knew who his dad was, presumably, because you were probably,
yes.
Yeah.
But it wasn't particularly,
that's not the reason.
That wasn't the truth.
Yes, that is a bonus, if anything else.
Yes.
But that's another, Bugsy Malone, zero people here know Bugsy Malone.
It's a cult. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it's not well known in the U.S. There's not like a whole cult audience for it. Like it's a weird novelty that people will sort of reference. But when I first moved to the UK, that was the thing. I'm like, wait, everyone knows the movie Bugsy Malone here?
Yeah, the set of the soundtrack as well for the car. Yes, and obviously Jodie Foster.
Yes,
aged she must have been about 13 or 14 when she made that.
At most, yeah. But again, you had that in the car with the Muppets. Both feature quite a lot of Paul Williams songs. If you had the Carpenters too, it would have been the whole trifecta there.
Yes, why did we not have the Carpenters? Sorry, missed a trick there.
Or the Phantom of the Paradise soundtrack, which Paul Williams terrified me in that film. Then where are we on Wednesday? Anything pop out to you?
Wednesday, what do we have? We have, see, now I never saw this, but when I saw it this was in the Radio Times, the Team Disco Dance Championship.
Yes.
I want to watch that right now.
Same. I really need to hunt that down because that sounds amazing.
I just, the whole disco era, see, because I was busy like working really hard at being sort of, cool, I didn't allow myself to enjoy disco the way I should have. It had to be irony, it had to be with an eyebrow cocked. But, disco's absolutely brilliant. And I acquired actually recently an artwork from an American artist who actually watches Scotland's Home of the Year, and he made contact through Instagram, and then I liked one of his pieces, and he sent me a print of it, and it's Olivia Newton-John in Let's Get Physical, in the Let's Get Physical video.
Yeah.
And it says in kind of like, 80s-y computer kind of text, Olivia Newton-John, physical as fuck. And it's one of my favorite pieces.
It is funny. I was very similar with that stuff too, because you're like dance music or whatever. But you know, as you get older, you realize how subversive it was, and how like empowering of like the gay community and the Black and Puerto Rican community here in America, and like it was so much more than that. And it's, you know, there's some amazing stuff there. That even, you know, when I look at the post-punk bands that really were influenced by it, you know, you look at Gang of Four and like these bands that embrace sort of disco stuff in a really cool way. You know, pop group or something. It's pretty great. But seeing teenagers in 1984, which is, to be fair, pretty past the prime of disco in the UK, which was not the most disco-y country, doing a disco dancing competition is just gold.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely would want to watch that.
Yes, I'll see if I can hunt that down, and then I will pass it along if I obtain it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anything else there, or were you on to Thursday?
On Wednesday I had Abbott and Costello, and I suppose that was the same thing about growing up with watching sort of really old repeats of stuff on a Sunday afternoon when it's raining outside and there's nothing else to do, and sort of Laurel and Hardy, Abbott Costello. I mean, even Buster Keaton. I mean, all of it. I watched it all.
Yeah,
and loved it all, and found it really, really, you know, really. I mean, Abbott and Costello is so funny.
Yeah, that sort of fast-paced, sort of very vaudeville word comedy, which when you watch it at the same time as you're watching stuff like The Young Ones, you can weirdly see the parallels between those two. It's like it almost skips, you know, 20 or 30 years in the middle, and it kind of goes right back to the original stuff that is really funny and really fourth wall breaking and meta. There's a movie called Hell's a Poppin'. Have you ever seen that movie?
Oh, I'm sure I have. Yeah, it rings a bell.
It was this comedy duo called Olsen and Chick. They were contemporaries of Abbott and Costello, and they did this show on Broadway for like 10 years, but it's this crazy, surreal, weird, like meta, seems really contemporary, but it's like 1941, you know, and bizarre and alt, and it's still funny now. And, you know, I show it to people and it blows their mind. There's actually an amazing swing dancing scene in that movie with these two African-American dancers, which is crazy for 1941. And they're doing insane stuff, like stuff that just looks superhuman, and it's like a full 5-minute dance sequence in this movie. But seeing stuff like that as a kid, you're like, wow, things were really cool at some point as well.
Yes, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I was recently, very, very off-piste here, but I was just recently reading the biography of the architect and furniture designer Eileen Gray, who was active sort of 20s, 30s and 40s. She was Irish, but she moved to Paris. And reading about her, you know, women weren't allowed to go out on their own. So she would go out with her girlfriend, and one of them would dress as a man so that they could go to jazz clubs and stuff like that. And I thought, yeah, there's always people doing crazy, weird, subversive shit. You know, we don't own it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the people doing it then had like much heavier consequences too, and they were still doing it, which was kind of a crazy thing. Yeah. Did you always feel sort of weirdly tied to sort of mid-century stuff? Like I had that as a kid, like for whatever reason, I almost had like for like the late 60s or like hippie and 70s stuff, and really gravitated towards like 50s, 40s stuff for whatever reason. It always felt like more comfortable for me growing up. And it seems like obviously in a way it must have for you as well.
I suppose so. I mean, I have this sort of theory that for people, what is retro is something that is about 10 years before what they grew up with, ish.
Yeah.
So, or at least what they grew up with, what they had an awareness of. Once you start to be aware of design, so like, you know, in your sort of late teens, mid to late teens. So in my mid to late teens, it was the 80s, and I still have a real challenge with 80s design. I know some of it is good, and I can assess it in a kind of academic way, because I was an academic for a while. 20 years I was lecturing at the art school, and but it doesn't touch me. And it's the same with 90s design, you know, which I did. You know, I was working as a designer in the 90s, and some of the stuff that I did in the early days, I'm like, oof, cringe. But anything before that is absolutely fine. And I have got a lot of mid-century stuff, but I've also got, you know, Victorian and Edwardian furniture as well. I just like to mix it up. I think for me, it's just what you like, what tickles you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And even like the Teddy Boy stuff, which fascinates me because it's sort of 50s rockabilly guys dressing like Edwardian guys.
Yeah.
But it works. It totally works.
That's right. Yeah, everything's a version of something else, and it's evolution, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I got called a teddy boy so much when I lived in the UK. The very first thing someone said to me the first time I was there was tying my shoe, and a guy in Soho said, "Oi, Elvis Presley, want to buy some drugs?"
Elvis look to you, actually.
Yeah.
I reckon you could have another life as an impersonator. What about that?
Less so now, but when I was 19, absolutely. Although I probably have literally grown into the look a little more of him at this age than I did then. So where are we? Thursday, anything?
Oh, Thursday. Well, Thursday, it's still really always been a really hot night for TV, hasn't it? Thursday. Yeah. So I've got a load of things on Thursday. I have Happy Days. Used to love watching Happy Days. So he's not really a rockabilly, is he, old Henry? Yeah. But, he tried.
Good as you're going to get at that time on TV.
Yeah. And I was obsessed with the movie Grease growing up, and Happy Days was a kind of, I don't know.
Sanitized?
Not an equivalence, but at least kind of filled that void of not being able to watch Grease every single day of my life.
Grease for people who hate musicals.
Yes, exactly. Grease people who really don't understand the 50s.
Yes.
Even more than Grease didn't understand the 50s. And then Doctor Who. I couldn't not put Doctor Who in there. Every British person is defined by who their doctor was. Yeah. That's how you know how old somebody is, by asking them, well, who was your Doctor Who? So mine was Tom Baker. Quite a controversial one. He's not probably the most popular one looking back over the years, but I still do watch it from time to time.
Same.
Between you and me.
Yeah, I do too. Every so often, and it's still it's a kid show. It still is. The kids are a little more sophisticated, I think, so the show's a little more sophisticated. Tom Baker was the first Doctor Who we got here.
Right. So you did get it. You did get it.
We did get it. Our PBS stations, which is sort of like our BBC, aired it here. And weirdly, one of the fascinating things, just as sort of an archivist, sort of nerd for old television, the BBC Doctor Who Restoration Group, when they were doing the DVDs, they have a blog about how they would find prints of these shows, because a lot of them were wiped from tapes or missing from the archives. So a lot of them they would hunt down US, sometimes in Africa, sometimes in Australia, companies that had actual prints that they used to air in these other countries and get those prints. Because there were no other copies, and then they had to restore them and colorize them. Some of them were it's like this fascinating story of hunting down this stuff, just from weird, in the middle of Oklahoma, some PBS station had, aired this Tom Baker one that they didn't even have anymore. And they found a, 16 millimeter. It's just some crazy thing.
Yeah, because that's it. Things would be broadcast once and then maybe kept on the shelf for a while and then put in the bin to make room for something else. Yeah,
tape is expensive. We got to reuse that stuff.
Yeah. They
did that here as well. I interviewed this guy who produced actually Elvis's 68 comeback special. He's an amazing producer, but he was at lunch one day with Dinah Shore, who was a very famous singer and talk show host here. And she got a call at the restaurant and they were like, hey, they're wiping all your tapes because they're going to reuse them. You might want to go down. And she had to go down and buy the tapes, because they were like, well, these tapes are worth $1,000. They didn't care what was on them. They're just like, we need to put...
Yeah, she just bought them as if they were blank tapes.
Yeah, and so she actually out of pocket bought them, and it's the only reason that she still had those episodes. And there's episodes of her with David Bowie and Iggy Pop interviewing them in the middle, just crazy stuff that would have been lost forever, because they're just like, we're just reusing it. What are you talking about?
Oh my God.
No one wants to watch this again. Of course we wouldn't.
Brilliant story.
So you did that, and then what else on Thursday?
Oh, well, Tomorrow's World. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but that was a program that was on every week, and that was a kids program. Well, it was a kids program. It felt like a kids program, but it was
Yeah, because it was sort of
evening.
educational vaguely.
Yeah, but it was all about what tomorrow's world is going to be like. So they would be introducing sort of new inventions like, mobile telephones, which were, things the size of a shoebox with a handset on top attached with a curly wire. And it was just very exciting. I think that's part of being a designer, is always thinking about what the next thing is, I suppose. And that taps into that a little bit for me, that watching that program and trying to imagine what the future world was going to be like.
Yeah, futurism is always fascinating to me because I like to see what they got right and what they got way wrong. Sometimes one is more interesting than the other. Did you ever see Look Around You, the show Peter Serafinowicz did?
Yeah.
The second series of that was a parody of Tomorrow's World.
Right, yes.
They're full half hours, and one of the jokes is that they're always, anything they talk about, they're like, and it's made right here in Britain, because it's like very much very yes, us. So if people haven't seen Tomorrow's World and have seen that is sort of what that is based on. But I love looking back and seeing those things and seeing like how just slightly off their predictions would be, or, oh, we'll all have flying cars by 1997.
Yes, exactly. Yes, because they're talking about the future, and the future is still the past.
Yeah.
It just blows your mind.
It really does. It really does.
And I had to put TOTP, Top of the Pops, again, weekly compulsory viewing, because you got to find out who was number one. And that was the artists themselves lip syncing in the studio. It was just unbearably exciting.
Yeah, and the thing that always amazes me about Top of the Pops was that the charts in the UK were true sales charts, because in the US they were all made up. Like, they were literally, the labels just paid for whoever to be on them. So it would be pop acts. And in the UK, you'd get crazy acts on Top of the Pops. Like, you're having like heavy metal bands and goth bands, and then, novelty, just because it's what really was purchased.
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
And this would have been right after the Christmas #1. This is the week after, which is like the biggest thing of the year. Like, if someone had the #1 at Christmas in the UK, that's like the best you're going to shoot for. So it was always like, who's going to have it? I don't remember what it was in 84 or 83.
Probably Cliff Richard.
Yeah, it was usually Cliff Richard. It might have been Do They Know It's Christmas that year?
Ooh.
Maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe in 83.
Oh, no.
But it was always some kind of novelty song would usually be it, though. It'd be like, something weird.
In amongst it, yes. You'd have like a punk band, some kind of like glossy pop synth band, and then you'd have like Grandad We Love You or something.
Like a cartoon bunny or like something just bizarre. There's one of my favorite stories is that they had a union rule that if you played on the recording that they're miming to, you have to mime on the set. Like, which is really weird. Like, you played it in the studio, so you have to be the one to pretend to play it on the stage. But
really?
Yes, that was the union rule. And so if you look at when Mott the Hoople was on and all the young dudes charted, there's a piano chord, because David Bowie wrote that song, and none of them could play this. It's like a weird chord. So he was in the studio and he just played that part. So when they're on Top of the Pops, David Bowie is just standing there playing this one good piano chord because of a union rule. Like, well, he did in the studio, he's going to do it here. It's just like, okay, that's the rule. It's bizarre.
That's gold. You don't get cool things like that happening anymore.
No, I think it's the thing I miss the most is the mixture of all different kinds of people. Like on talk shows as well. Graham Norton does it still, I think, to a degree. But just you couldn't plan to have that mixture of bizarre things that just don't go together, but because they don't go together, they all go together really well.
Yeah, everything's just got too polished, hasn't it? A bit like London, a bit like New York.
Yeah.
But it's everybody's on a talk show they've got carefully rehearsed anecdotes and they're peddling something. They're not just on the show because they're interesting or weird or might be off. Yeah.
I think it's a mixture of things aren't made to just air once now. Like, I think when stuff just aired once, they were a little more laissez-faire about it, because they're like, well, it's just, we get it on the air and whatever, and then it's gone. And then B, yeah, they have such algorithms, and they know exactly who they want to watch a thing, so they can really micro-target. And it does make you feel, when you're not the person being micro-targeted, when you're watching that thing, you're like, this is not for me. This is literally not made for me.
What we have to do is get an old TV guide from like 20, 30, 40 years ago and watch that stuff instead, and then the algorithms will be exploded.
Yes, it'll make everything go way wacky. And they're like, what? They want Tom Baker back? I don't understand what's going on here. Jamie and the Magic Torch is huge. So then Friday, the final night of this holiday week, what did you do?
Well, the A-Team,
yes.
Again, compulsory viewing. When we're making Scotland's Home of the Year, we go around in a black van. With me, Kate, and Michael in the back, and we regularly, channel our A-Team vibe.
Have you decided who's who?
Oh no! So that might be contentious. I don't know. Who
true.
do you think is who?
Oh, geez, I don't know. That would be tough.
I think I want to be Mr. T.
Yeah, I think everyone wants to be Mr. T.
I know. And then that's very predictable of me to say that.
George Peppard, though, that was designed as his show originally.
Oh, really?
Which he was very not happy about, that it became the Mr. T show. They used to have standoffs where they wouldn't shoot for a whole day because it was like, I'm not coming out of the trailer before he does. And then they just wouldn't come out. And George Peppard famously, whenever he would introduce himself to people, he'd say, I'm George Peppard, I'm not a nice man. So, but yeah, he is the leader, I guess. Yeah, that show. The other thing too, in the UK, they sort of targeted that show towards kids more than here.
Yeah.
That was a primetime adult show here. Which is hilarious. Same with Knight Rider in the UK, but they're like, oh, this is for kids, put it on at 4:00.
Yeah. So I've got Knight Rider in my list. That was for the day before as well. Yeah. Yes, I don't know. There's sort of something about that sort of alien thing as well. This sort of American world. That was the only way we could understand what it might be like over there.
Totally accurate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope so.
Have you ever been here?
Yeah, I go to New York regularly. Well, obviously not in the last couple of years. Dying to do a road trip. I want to do a redneck road trip.
I'll go like Route 66 to the south.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was just in New Orleans for the first time. I'd never been down there, and it was different. It's a different world.
I love New Orleans. I'd love to go to Austin. Yeah,
I love Los Angeles. Like, growing up here in Boston is very similar to London in a lot of ways. So even for me, it's very alien to go to those places in the U.S. It's very, very different. But none of them are like the A-Team or Knight Rider. For now.
Went to Palm Springs, and that did feel a bit like being in a movie.
Yes.
That's like a weird dystopian movie.
Yes. Where like everyone's like, we only have things from 1950 and through 50 through 62 that we have to make a society out of.
Yeah.
In this desert in the middle of nowhere. Or like it has that sort of vibe of like Cuba, where none of the cars are newer than a certain year.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like, which is cool, but you're also kind of like, this is weird.
It's very weird. I went for a walk, and a car pulled over and asked me if I was okay.
Yeah, no one walks.
Yeah.
Well, there's that Missing Person song, Nobody Walks in L.A. They think something's wrong with you. Did your car break down? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you should do it. That would be a great road trip. Austin is pretty cool, and just that whole. Actually, Billy Connolly did a Route 66 show a few years ago.
Yeah,
where he motorcycled the whole Route 66, and it was really great to see like him experiencing all that stuff for the first time. It was pretty cool. Anything else on Friday?
Well, I had Well, Cheers. I suppose that's the same sort of. Yeah. So that's a Boston thing there for you.
Very accurate. Very accurate. Weirdly, that show is exactly what growing up here was like, where everyone was sort of an alcoholic in this bar. And that bar is a real bar here. And so when I was a kid, we would go. And it was very confusing because you see a TV show and they base the set exactly on this real bar. And I'd go with my uncle and be like, where is Cliff and Norm? And he'd be like, oh, they're not here today.
They're not working today.
Because growing up here, there were no like, New York and LA were a million miles away. So you never, the idea of like a film set wasn't a thing. So it was extra strange to be like, this is the thing from the show everybody watches. But that show holds up. I rewatch that all the time and love it.
It's so funny. It's so funny. And there's a bar not far from where I live in the West End in Glasgow called Stravagin. And there's a kind of group of friends of ours, friends that we often go there. And we don't call it Stravagin, we call it Cheers. You can go there on your own, and there's always going to be somebody that you know, and they're probably going to be sitting in their usual spot.
Yeah, that was the thing that, like, when I first moved to England, I've never drank before. I still don't, but I didn't like bars here. But then, like, pubs is a whole different vibe. Like, I would go hang out, and it's just like it's just totally different. Like
a community center with beer.
Yes, exactly. Like here it was like, oh, if you're at a bar at 11 o'clock on a Thursday, you're probably an alcoholic. But I'm like at a pub, you're kind of like, no, I just go there and do my work. And like, you talk to people, like it's more like a coffee shop or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which was very eye-opening to me. So you did Cheers and then anything else?
It's the last thing on the list was the Sweeney, which is a kind of a strange thing to end on.
Yes, but a great thing to end on.
Yeah, so that's the sort of thing that I wouldn't have been allowed to watch.
Because it's too violent, or?
Yeah, too violent. So I put that on the list of if I was transported back in time, then I would watch that, because to watch that at the time that it was made in context, I think would have been really amazing.
So it was like a rough 70s urban cop show. That was You're Nicked, right? Was that the Sweeney?
Yeah.
And it was very, very, I guess the equivalent here would be like sort of Starsky and Hutch, but if Starsky and Hutch had no humor in it.
It absolutely no sense of humor and no color. I mean, the whole thing looked like it had been shot in sepia.
Yeah.
Because the clothes were brown, the cars were brown, the buildings were gray. It was always kind of cloudy or probably raining, and everyone looking very unattractive. No attractive people in it, really.
No. But a huge hit.
I'm really selling it, aren't I? Yeah, it's a huge hit. Yeah.
Like everything you've said about it should not mean that people watched it, but a massive show that's like been a cultural touchstone, to the point where Life on Mars, that show from a few years back, was basically like a tribute to the Sweeney. And it never really aired here. It is a really fascinating, weird snapshot of 70s crime Britain.
Yes. Probably not completely inaccurate, actually, which is maybe why it looks so kind of grey. But and why nobody is beautiful in it. I mean, I think really radical. When you think about sort of, I mean, like The Wire, something like that. I feel like that. The Sweeney is maybe not where it started. I don't know what came before in the US, whether there was stuff that was in that way, that kind of realism, uncompromising realism.
Not in a cop show, not till like the late 80s, early 90s, like NYPD Blue here, or like Homicide. Like it really was 20. Yeah. Amazing show. But this was like 25 years before that. We still had sort of fun cop shows. We had Kojak, we had Starsky and Hutch, we had, even Miami Vice, which was grittier, is still the most glamorous 80s thing. I mean Phil Collins is playing a drug kingpin on Miami Vice, for God's sake. It's not the same thing. So are there shows like that you've gone back as an adult, now that you presumably have free reign to watch whatever you like, and revisited to be like, I couldn't watch this then, I'm going to watch it now?
Well, actually, you contacting me about doing this podcast has given me that idea. I mean, you know what it's like. There's so much incredible content available at the moment. It feels almost like homework, like a chore. Like people are going, my God, you haven't watched, you yet, or you haven't watched this, or you haven't watched that. Like, I'm trying.
Yes.
But there's only so many hours in the day, and I have to work.
Yes.
But yeah, I would really like to. I mean, you inviting me to look at just 1 week's worth of TV from way back then did make me want to dig it all out. Yeah, I'd love to watch the Sweeney. I haven't watched that. Can't even remember.
It's amazing. If you do, please let me know what you think, because that's the other piece of this is you could easily watch that now from anywhere, which is like, that was the dream. Is if someone was like, you can have a portable device, you could watch any TV show ever made whenever you want. That would have been tomorrow's world, where it would have been like,
exactly. There you go.
That's great. You can't do that. And we can, and we take it for granted, which is amazing. So to wrap up here, when we were talking before, you're saying you guys did a Christmas special for Scotland Home of the Year.
That's right. Yes. I haven't got a TX date for it yet, but it's very exciting. The Three Musketeers, as we call ourselves, we're going to be traveling all over Scotland again for a 1-hour special where we are going to be judging people's Christmas decorations. But
you shot it presumably like in the summer.
No. We shot it fairly. But while we were on the road, the rushes were getting sent back, so the edit started while we were still filming. So, yes, because it's pretty unfair to expect people to decorate their houses in June.
Yes.
But yeah, it was really, really fun, really different to be filming at night and being allowed to wear a coat, because you'll be aware from watching the show that we're never allowed to wear jackets or jumpers, coats, because we have to always make it look like it's the summer. And it is the summer, but it's the summer in Orkney or Devon. So it's bloody fucking freezing.
Yes.
And we've got the director saying, "Can you stop shivering? Because it doesn't look good." He's like, "Well, give me a jacket then."
This is not a voluntary action.
Yeah. But so yeah, very, very, Kate and I particularly, because obviously Michael gets to wear his suit and his waistcoat and stuff like that, so he doesn't get cold. But we're in our little, summery outfits. So very exciting to be allowed to wear jumpers and coats and hats and all sorts. That's maybe not the most exciting thing for people watching the program, but it is the thing that got Kate and I most excited about making it. But no, I'm being facetious. But just absolute joy. We've always joked, because we've just filmed the 4th series of Scotland's Home of the Year, which will be broadcast in the spring. And every year we have been going around these homes going, imagine what this place is like at Christmas, And then we're like, we should do a Christmas special. And finally, after 4 years of the show, we're doing a Christmas special, and it's going to be amazing.
Well, I'm very excited because I feel like once you do a Christmas special, that's when you know the show is like really made it and solidified as a part of the culture. But my wife and I, when we watch really any show or when we go anywhere, but especially Scotland's Home of the Year, we would say that when we were watching the show, she'd be like, "Where would you put the Christmas tree in this house?" Like that's sort of the first thing we think of. So it'll be interesting to actually see the answer to some of those questions, which I'm very excited about if and when we're able to see it here. But I may just have to call someone in Scotland and have them describe it to me over the phone. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been great talking to you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I really, really enjoyed it. A real trip down memory lane.
There you go. That's Anna. As I said, how cool is she? That was just a ton of fun. I'm so glad that I got a chance to talk to her. Hopefully I'll be able to see Scotland's Home of the Year holiday special. Maybe I'll have to break out the old VPN, but, or just travel to Scotland and see it there, which is something I'd like to do, as discussed in this episode. If you would like to email me, you can do so at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken@icanread.com. We also have the Patreon, patreon.com/tvguidancecounselor. You can give us anything from $1 a month to just $100,000 a month. $1 is amazing. If everyone who listened to the show gave me $1, I could do this full time and wouldn't need a day job. But that is not your responsibility. That is mine. And I love each and every person who contributes to that Patreon, because it is all a help for me to do the show. show. I'm a one-man production company, research department, and hosting services here, but also totally cool if you can't give to the show, because I know times are tough, and I just appreciate you listening to the show, and it is still my favorite thing that I've ever done. It's 8 years in, almost 9 years in. Still a good time. Speaking of good times, we'll have a brand new episode next week of TV Guidance Counselor, so I hope to see you there then for that brand new episode of TV Guidance Counselor.
A wonderful, wonderful bit of Schadenfreude there, which I very much enjoyed.